It started with a scream. Not the kind you hear on Halloween, not a cheap scare. This one was real, sharp, guttural. It sliced through the empty halls of Edison High like a blade. Walt Henderson stopped his mop mid-swipe. The janitor had heard a lot in this school. Fights, fire alarms, football players bragging. But never that. Not at 10:47 p.m. Not in the science wing. He clutched the heavy ring of keys at his belt, the one that gave him access to every single room, every office, every locked drawer in the building. The scream came again. Closer. Higher. His hand hovered near the switch on his walkie. But he didn't press it. Because something about that scream sounded like a secret. He followed the sound. The hallway leading to room 312 smelled of ammonia and faint sulfur, sharp and sour like a chemistry experiment gone wrong. The overhead lights buzzed above Walt as he crept forward, the squeak of his rubber soles echoing against the linoleum. His breath misted in the air, the school's heating always cut out in the far wings at night. The closer he got, the more his gut twisted. The door was slightly open. A narrow beam of moonlight bled through the blinds, slicing the dark room into angled shadows. Inside, the science lab looked like a crime scene frozen in time. Desks were pushed back in disarray. Broken glass glittered on the floor like spilled ice. A soft, wet sound came from the corner like a sob smothered by a fist. Walt stepped in slowly, eyes adjusting. She was there, huddled beneath a lab bench, legs curled to her chest. Her dress was soaked to the bone, clinging to her frame like second skin. A velvet choker hung askew around her neck. Her hands shook, thin, pale fingers clenched into fists. He could see the raw panic on her face, a look that didn't belong to someone who was simply lost. This was the look of someone who had seen something they were never meant to see. "Help me," she said. Her voice cracked like glass. "Please. I didn't mean to." Walt's eyes slid past her. Behind the lab table, a man lay crumpled on the floor. His head was twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood seeped into the tile grout like wine into fabric. His glasses were shattered beside his outstretched hand. A brass name tag glinted faintly in the moonlight. Bowers. Walt didn't speak. He didn't need to. He crouched beside her, the floor cold against his knees. "You can't stay here," he said gently. She hesitated. Her eyes darted to the body, to the door, back to him. He pulled the ring of keys from his belt, fingers moving automatically until they found the one wrapped in red tape, the forbidden one, the key that opened the service exit by the gym, the one with no cameras, no alarms, nothing but silent night beyond. She took his hand. They moved like ghosts through the halls. Every creak of the floorboards was a cannon blast in Walt's ears. The girl's breath came shallow, hitching every few steps. When they reached the door, he unlocked it with a soft click. He held it open. "Run," he said. She didn't look back, and in that moment, neither did he. At sunrise, Edison High stood silent, its bricks steaming with the chill of early morning rain. Police cruisers were parked crooked across the staff lot. Blue and red lights pulsed against wet pavement, flickering like a heartbeat too fast and too loud. Walt stood behind a vending machine near the faculty lounge, half shielded from the chaos. He hadn't gone home. He hadn't even sat down. Instead, he watched the parade of uniforms flow in and out of the science wing, like bees swarming a shattered hive. The hallway still smelled of chemicals, bleach, now layered over something coppery and deep. He could feel it in his teeth, in his spine. Officer Daly approached. The man was broad, square-shouldered, eyes hidden beneath the brim of his hat. His boots left thick, wet prints across the freshly waxed floor. You work nights? He asked, flipping open a notebook. Walt nodded. Every night. You see or hear anything out of the ordinary? Walt stared at the scuffed floor tiles, pretending to think. The image of the girl's face, pale, tear-streaked, floated behind his eyelids. Her voice, that broken crack of panic. Just thunder, he said. Daly stared at him for a long beat. Walt didn't flinch. He'd learned silence as a second language. All right, the officer said finally, snapping the notebook shut. Get some rest. Walt nodded once, but rest wouldn't come. Because 5 feet behind Officer Daly, a bloodstain still ghosted the floor. It had been scrubbed, wiped, bleached, but some things never fully came out. Walt had spent his life cleaning up after others, but this time he knew he'd erased more than just a mess. He'd erased a witness, and maybe, just maybe, a crime. The knock came at 2:14 a.m. sharp. Clean, measured, not the kind of knock that begged entry, the kind that expected it. Walt blinked awake on the couch, still in his coveralls, half a sandwich untouched on the coffee table. The glow from the muted TV painted the room in flickering shadows. Rain whispered against the window pane. His body ached, and something deep inside him tightened. He moved slowly to the door of his apartment's second floor, above an old pawn shop on 5th. The hallway outside was silent except for the hum of a dying fluorescent tube. He didn't open the door immediately. He looked first. The man on the other side didn't belong in a building like this. Gray suit, black gloves, hair slicked back with precision, the kind of man who never had to knock twice. He wasn't sweating from the climb. He wasn't cold from the rain. He just stood there, like he owned the space around him. Walt cracked the door 2 inches, chain still on. Can I help you? The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. She talked to you. Walt stiffened. Excuse me. The girl, the man said. The one you let go. Walt didn't answer. The man tilted his head slightly. You used the red key. Walt said nothing. You know what that key opens? It wasn't a question. Not really. The man's smile faded. His tone dropped. There are places in that school that don't officially exist. Rooms the cameras skip. Doors that don't appear on the blueprints. That key was never meant to be used by someone like you. Walt felt his jaw tighten. The man leaned in. Next time, don't get involved. Then, as quietly as he came, he turned and walked down the hall. He never looked back. 2 days later, Walt saw her face again. He was in the back of Mac's Deli, waiting for a sandwich, trying to act like a man who still had a normal life. The old radio behind the counter crackled with static between pop songs and half-hearted weather updates. Then the voice of a news anchor broke through, measured, emotionless. Missing. Addison Blackwell, 17, daughter of Congressman Everett Blackwell. Last seen leaving the annual New Horizons charity gala in downtown. Walt turned. On the grainy screen of the wall-mounted TV, there she was. Same girl. Same wide, frightened eyes. The photo was too polished, too posed, taken long before the lab, before the blood. She wore a black satin gown and a diamond necklace that sparkled even in low resolution. Anyone with information is asked to contact the authorities. The deli suddenly felt colder. Walt gripped the edge of the counter. The smell of grilled onions and grease clung to his clothes, but he couldn't breathe. That girl hadn't wandered into the school by accident. She had chosen it, chosen to hide, and he had helped her vanish. The air in the interrogation room was dead, not quiet dead, like it hadn't been moved in years. Pale walls, 1 metal table, 2 plastic chairs, no windows, no clock, just tension clinging to everything like static. Walt sat stiffly, arms crossed. He hadn't asked for water, and he didn't want their courtesy. The flickering light overhead buzzed like a mosquito in a room, with no escape. The door creaked open. The detective walked in with a casual saunter, trying too hard to look tired, harmless. Rolled sleeves, open collar, cheap watch. He dropped a folder on the table and eased into the seat across from Walt like this was just another Monday. "Appreciate you coming in, Mr. Henderson. We're just trying to get the facts straight." Walt didn't respond. The detective opened the folder, slow and deliberate, slid a photo forward. "You know her." Addison. Glammed up. Diamond necklace. Media smile. "Never seen her." The detective raised a brow. "She was last spotted inside Edison High 2 nights ago, right around your shift." Walt shrugged. "Big school, lots of doors." "Funny thing," the detective continued, "we have a log showing a side exit, opened after hours." "The one without cameras." Walt looked at him now, flat and unblinking. "Then fix your cameras." The detective leaned in, voice dipping lower. "See, Walt, we don't want this to get messy. We know Bowers was a piece of work. We know scared kids make bad choices. But you've got someone to protect." He pulled another photo, a school portrait, a girl with curly hair and a big grin. "Your niece, right?" Walt's knuckles went white against the table. "Aha, she's got a shot at a stable life. Would be a shame if that got complicated." One phone call and Walt's voice cut in, razor sharp. "Try it, just try." The detective blinked. "We're giving you a way out. Say the girl showed up alone. Say she panicked. Say Bowers pushed too hard. You want me to lie? We want to close a case. Everyone walks away clean." Walt stood, slow and cold. "I've been cleaning up after people my whole life, but I'm not sweeping this under the rug for you." He stared the detective down. "You want a story? Write your own damn fiction." And he walked out, leaving the photos, the folder, and the lie behind. It started the next morning. His keycard didn't work. Walt stood at the side door of Edison High, rain soaking into the collar of his jacket, the gray morning pressing down like a punishment. He tried the card again. The same red blink. Access denied. No warning, no message, just silence. He walked around to the front, boots splashing in shallow puddles. Through the glass doors he could see the new security guard, someone he didn't recognize, watching him without moving. The secretary wouldn't meet his eyes. "We're conducting an internal review," she said stiffly. "You'll be contacted." Walt nodded, left, said nothing. But the damage had already begun. By noon, his bank account was locked for suspicious activity. By evening, a city inspector showed up at his building, clipboard in hand, citing violations that had never existed before. The next morning, CPS called to schedule an urgent review of his guardianship. Efficient, surgical, quiet. Someone had pulled the strings, and they were pulling them tight. By the end of the week, Walt had been erased from Edison High's payroll. No severance, no explanation. Just gone, a ghost where a man had been. He sat at the edge of the bed in his one-room apartment, holding his niece's drawing crayon stick, figures labeled Uncle Walt and Me, and realized what he was up against. Not just a school, not just a lie. A machine. And it had noticed him. But the machine had made one mistake. It hadn't broken him. Not yet. There's a silence that lives in empty school buildings at night, deep, hollow, too big for any one man to carry. Walt moved through that silence with practiced steps, flashlight beam cutting through the dark like a scalpel. He was breaking and entering technically, but the alarm system hadn't changed. He knew which panel didn't engage,
which camera blinked offline for 60 seconds every loop. He had memorized the school's skeleton like it was his own body. He needed proof. Room 305, the AV storage closet, hadn't been touched in months. Shelves sagged under old VCRs, tangled cords, dusty tripods. A dead smell lingered in the carpet mildew, forgotten equipment, the weight of disuse. He powered up the old backup server tucked behind a monitor tower. It groaned, fans coughing to life. The screen flickered. Password prompt. He smiled grimly. He had reset that password himself years ago. Still worked. The server loaded its archive, hundreds of hours of hallway footage, most of it useless. But Walt was patient. He scanned, sorted, narrowed the window, focused on the time just before he heard the scream. And then he found it. A silent video clip, time-stamped 10:42 p.m., camera outside, room 312, no sound, grainy, but clear enough. Addison entered the room first, hesitant, looking over her shoulder. Then Bowers followed, aggressive, blocking the doorway, gesturing with his hands. He cornered her against the lab table. She shrank back. Walt's fists clenched. At the edge of the frame, a shadow moved. Another person, no face, just motion. A blur. They moved behind Bowers. He turned, too late. One violent blow. Bowers dropped. Addison screamed. The shadow fled. Walt exhaled slowly, hands trembling. He copied the file. 3 drives, one for backup, one to hide, one to send. Because now, he had something they couldn't erase. Now, he had truth. Walt didn't sleep that night. He sat hunched at his kitchen table, the flickering bulb above casting a dull yellow haze over stacks of unpaid bills and worn tools. The 3 USB drives sat before him like landmines. He stared at them for hours. In the end, he picked the middle one, the drive marked with a tiny strip of green tape, the one he'd send. By morning, he was on the bus across town, hunched low in his seat, hoodie pulled up. The city moved past in blur, rain-streaked glass, graffiti-tagged corners, people rushing to jobs they hated. He got off near Midtown, walked 6 blocks in silence, buzzed the door of a brick building with no sign. 2nd floor, office tall, B. Inside, cluttered bookshelves, 2 mics, soundproof foam, and a woman with silver streaks in her black curls and fire behind her eyes. Nadine Cortez, podcast host, former reporter, the one person who'd never learned how to keep her head down. Walt dropped the USB on her desk. "What's this?" she asked. "Proof." She plugged it in, watched the footage, once, twice, 3 times. The 3rd time, she paused just as the shadow moved behind Bowers. "You know what this is going to do, right?" Walt nodded. "Good," she said, "because there's no coming back from it." He looked her in the eye. "I don't want back. I want it to burn." The episode went live at 7:02 a.m. By 7:14, it had been reposted on 2 major news blogs. By 7:36, it hit trending. By 8:05, Addison Blackwell's name was on every screen in the country. The footage was raw, blurry, silent, but it was enough. Enough to shake foundations, enough to expose rot. Walt watched from the corner booth of a diner. No one cared about the kind with faded menus, cracked syrup bottles, and a jukebox that hadn't worked in a decade. The vinyl seats stuck to skin, and the waitress moved like she hadn't slept in years. The air smelled of burnt toast and overbrewed coffee, mixed with the faint chemical tang of cleaning spray. His phone buzzed every minute. Unknown numbers, messages, notifications. Pings from reporters, lawyers, strangers, offers, threats, praise. It all blurred together. By 9 o'clock, Congressman Everett Blackwell held a press conference. He stood behind a podium flanked by flags, stone-faced, and repeated a script full of denial. He denied everything. By 9:22, a second clip was leaked Addison, tearful, shaking, confessing on camera what Bowers had done, what her father had covered. At 9:57, the congressman resigned. On live television, mid-sentence, the words failed him before the truth did. By noon, the school board announced an independent investigation. By 1:30, the security firm that had sent the man in the gray suit issued a statement and then pulled every agent from Edison High, scrubbing websites and job listings like ghosts covering their tracks. By 4 p.m., Walt's niece was back home. CPS had nothing left to say. No warnings, no visits, just silence. He stood by the window that night, watching the city flicker. Somewhere in the distance, smoke curled skyward, maybe a fire, maybe just heat escaping, but it felt right. Like the world had cracked open and finally let in air. His name was out there now, his face. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't background. And the machine, it was burning. Edison High reopened after a week of chaos. Reporters had stopped circling like vultures, and the headlines had shifted to the next scandal. But something was different now. The walls felt thinner, the silences longer. The place wore its history like a bruise. Walt stepped through the front entrance for the first time in 11 days. He wasn't wearing his old janitor uniform. He didn't have keys jingling from his belt, but he moved like he still knew every inch of the building, every loose tile and creaking hinge. Every student who passed him in the hallway turned and looked. Some nodded. One girl, a freshman, whispered, "That's him," like she was seeing someone off a movie screen. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a symbol. He didn't stop walking. Principal Matthews met him outside the staff lounge. His face was pale, tighter than usual. His posture had lost its authority and settled into something closer to apology. He extended a hand like it weighed 50 pounds. "Welcome back, Mr. Henderson." Walt took it, briefly. "I'm not here to mop floors," he said. "Not anymore." Matthews hesitated, swallowed, then nodded once. Understood. By noon, he was in front of a classroom full of seniors, not as a teacher, not yet, but as someone who had their full attention. The district had asked him to speak about truth, about courage, about what it meant to do the right thing when everything said not to. They expected a speech. What they got was something else. Walt didn't read from a script. He didn't rehearse. He just told the truth. He told them about nights that feel endless, about what fear does to your voice, about how silence becomes survival and how it never, ever should. He talked about Addison, about the cost of doing the right thing, about the weight of being seen. When he finished, the room was quiet, but it wasn't empty silence. It was weight, respect, fire catching on dry grass. Afterward, a boy lingered behind, tall, thin, nervous. His eyes didn't quite meet Walt's. "That girl you helped," he said. "She's why I came forward, too. About my uncle." He touched Walt's shoulder, said thank you. Walt nodded once. That was enough. He had started something, and it wasn't done yet. 6 months later, the Edison Community Center opened on the edge of the city. It wasn't flashy, just brick and purpose. But inside, the walls were filled with life. After-school programs, night classes, warm meals, and a computer lab funded by donations that had poured in after the broadcast. Walt stood near the main desk, clipboard in hand, watching a group of teenagers joke around near the new mural. The art showed hands all colors, all sizes reaching out from shadow into light. Someone had added words to the bottom in clean black paint. "We don't look away." A small girl tugged at his sleeve. "You're the man from the story, right?" Walt crouched. "Which story?" "The one where the bad people lose." He smiled. "Just a little. I guess I am." Addison visited sometimes. She was living with family out of state now. She didn't say much when she came, just helped shelve books, made tea for the older volunteers, and always hugged Walt before she left. Her presence was quiet but steady, like healing that didn't need to announce itself. Once she asked him, "Do you ever wish you hadn't opened that door?" Walt had looked out the window at kids laughing in the sun. Not for a second. Because in the end, it wasn't about the door. It was about what happened after you dared to walk through it. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. Have you ever stood up when silence was easier, or maybe someone stood beside you when you needed it most? Share your story, because sometimes the quietest hallway leads to the loudest kind of courage.